goal of returning back to the Father each Friday at 1 p.m. Central. Email backtothefather@grnonline.com for more information.
Thinking Out Loud with Dave Palmer. Here on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and I hope you got your thinking cap ready, because we're going to be going through the 3 questions about creation that come right after St. Thomas's teaching on the most holy Trinity with none other than Dave Palmer. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, Keith. Good to be with you again on this Tuesday morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm blessed. I'll just say that I'm super motivated also to live my best day as well, based on Debbie and Adam's conversation there too.
Yeah, well, I hope the motivation just keeps on building throughout the show. That was awesome, and I want to thanks for that introduction. And I wanted to talk about something related to something I heard in a homily last Saturday. Some very good friends of ours have a son. His name is Brother Lazarus, and he took final vows for the CFRs in New York. And so on Saturday evening, we went to a celebration mass for Brother Lazarus now that he's made final vows. And he's not a priest yet, but he's on his way to the priesthood. And so the head of the CFRs, Father Stephen, gave this awesome homily. And in the course of the homily, he was talking about the Blessed Trinity, right? And of course, I've been studying the Blessed Trinity. We talked about it last week on this segment. And Father Stephen said that many of the church fathers, especially kind of the mystical fathers, would refer to the Blessed Trinity and their interactions with each other as the divine dance. Right. And I thought, wow, that is really cool. He even said St. Bonaventure, who's a great Franciscan who lived at the same time as St. Thomas Aquinas. And I thought, you know what, that really helps me understand the inner workings of the Trinity. And then I thought, I study Aquinas a lot. Aquinas doesn't typically use language like that. That's kind of poetic, kind of flowery language, which I love. There's nothing wrong with it, but Aquinas uses language like spiration, procession, generation, relations, paternity, affiliation when it comes to the Blessed Trinity. And I'm thinking, okay, that's all right. It's just a different approach. And then I went back and I thought, okay, with the Blessed Trinity, the first 43 questions of the Summa have to do with God. All right. So it isn't until 44 that he gets into creation, which we'll talk about today. 43 questions, and every question has an average of 4 articles. So you're talking about 160 articles that St. Thomas Aquinas dedicates to God before he moves on with the Summa. And I was thinking, and this is just a verifiable fact. St. Thomas Aquinas was obsessed with God. He was absolutely in love with God. And so what I want to talk about today is that after those 43 questions, where they're questions, but articles inside the questions, let's just say 160 different things that St. Thomas Aquinas asked about God, he doesn't refer to it as a divine dance like St. Bonaventure did, but this dynamic of relations and intense love between the Blessed Trinity bursts out creation. The only thing some people don't like the Trinity being compared to a married couple, but those of us who are married, like I think most of us here, realize that when you get married, for most of us, there's an expectation that marriage is going to, hopefully, God willing, burst out with creation of a child. And so that's one way that we can relate to the Blessed Trinity. And so I wanted to talk today about 3 ways that we can come to better understand God through our experience with the created world that bursts forth from the Blessed Trinity. And I'm going to give very brief quotes from the Summa and just talk about these 3 ways. And maybe these are ways that people throughout the day today, even though we can't see God, can see the effects and see him in our experience of the created world. And we could start today because all these are pretty simple, even though they're they're used in language that St. Thomas Aquinas, you might say, gosh, that sounds kind of complicated. But if you boil it down, it's not that complicated. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Any questions, Keith, before I get rolling on this?
Well, you know me, I love simple, but I do have a question.
Yeah.
St. Bonaventure, you mentioned that he described the Trinity as the divine dance. What's the story behind naming it the divine dance?
Well, it's when you're dancing, you're in coordination, you're in relationship, there's order, you can't dance when you're not like focused on the other, right? And so
Right.
there's also this sense of intimacy, this sense of love. You probably wouldn't dance with somebody you don't like, right?
No.
And so what the point is that there is within the Blessed Trinity a dynamic of love, a dynamic of relationship between Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There is procession. I guess, for the lack of to make it very simple, there's a lot going on, and we know that the third person of the Blessed Trinity really processes through the love of the Father and the Son. And so what he's trying to get at is that this is a relational God that has the three persons that are in relationship with each other. And so that's why he described it as a dance.
Got it. That was a perfect explanation. But without further ado, I'll let you back to it.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I probably thank you. I appreciate that clarifying question. So there's a question in the Summa where he says, is the exemplar cause anything besides God? Okay, so he's talking about, is God the cause of all things in the world? And so this is where we can start to see that even though God may be kind of hard to understand, the world down here helps us to understand it. So he says we must say that in the divine wisdom are the types of all things, which types we have called ideas, exemplar forms existing in the divine mind. Okay, so he's saying that there are ideas in the mind of God. Well, we are unique as creatures because we have ideas. We have ideas of things. People that are listening right now are thinking of things. They're thinking of ideas. Well, the ideas of all things originate in the mind of God. That goes all the way back to St. Augustine, right? You think of the forms of Plato. Well, Augustine put those forms in the mind of God. So the first thing I would say is that anytime you have an idea of anything, which is pretty much constantly, relate that to the Blessed Trinity, because what St. Thomas is saying here is that all ideas originate in the mind of God. Okay, so even though the language is a little difficult, I think the concept is pretty simple. All right, so that's the first one. And then he says, is God the final cause of all things? And the final cause is an Aristotelian term that just means purpose or meaning, like why do we do what we do? And what Thomas is going to say here is that we do everything we do because of our desire for God. And the way he puts it is, he says there are imperfect agents, that's you and me, and to these it belongs to intend, even while acting, the acquisition of something. All right, so we're always desiring something. Like right now, I'm desiring breakfast in a big way, okay? We're desiring to do a good job at work today, okay? So all these desires we have. Then he says, but it does not belong to the first agent, who's God, who is agent only to act for the acquisition of some end. He intends only to communicate his perfection, which is his goodness, while every other creature intends to acquire its own perfection. So God isn't like working towards something. He's not, some kind of level of imperfection, but we are, right? So that's the second thing I challenge everybody, is that every desire that you have ultimately is a desire for God, because we're all trying to achieve some level of perfection, something better than we are right now. And ultimately that is a leap towards God, so to speak. All right. So, and then the third one I'll mention real quickly, and then we'll talk. He says, is in every creature is there necessarily found a trace of the Trinity? And he says every effect in some degree represents its cause, but diversely. Some effects represent only the causality of the cause. All right. He says such a representation is called a trace, for a trace shows that someone has passed by, but we do not know who it is. And so I love that. And so he's saying a trace is in every single thing in the world because it was created by God. But he says a trace indicates that you say somebody has passed by. So if you see a bird or a tree or the clouds today, or you notice a beautiful sunrise this morning, just say to yourself, somebody passed by. Who is that? It's like if you go downstairs and there's the ice cream was left out of the freezer and you say, somebody passed by, somebody left this. You always go back and find some cause of something that happened, right? But then he goes on to say that some creatures possess in them the image of God, right? They're not just, God just doesn't pass by and imprint on himself as a cause, but he actually places the very image of himself on those creatures. And of course, those creatures are us, right? So we, through our intellect and will, are the image of God, the image of the Trinity itself. And so that is a great privilege. And every single day you should say, thank God I am a human being with free will, intellect, and will made to the image and likeness of God. So anyways, the point is, I think the creation bursting forth from God, it can give us a good opportunity to reflect back and look at the Trinity and just kind of bring all this into our everyday experience of reflection and thankfulness to God.
Wow. Yeah. So I got a question. You mentioned these traces. Are these specific to things that God created, or do these also extend to things that we as humans create?
Oh, yeah. Awesome question. Yeah, there's a difference between natural and artistic. Okay. So if you look at a car driving down the freeway, you're not going to say, oh, God created that, that Tesla or that Buick, right? No, but God gave a creature the intellect in order to do it, or even a bird's nest for that matter. I mean, God allowed the bird to create that nest. And so these are like secondary causes. But that's a really, really important thing that you asked. And I also encourage people to teach their kids that, because by us creating pictures, by us creating cars or whatever, buildings and things like that, this is a reflection of God's creation. But also make the distinction, because when you see a tree or a sunrise, you don't say, oh, somebody made that. No, that's somebody that passed by was God, and so yeah, thanks. That was a great question. But yeah, that's the distinction there.
Thank you so much, Dave. We appreciate you. We can catch you more on Back to the Father, 1 p.m. on Fridays, GRN Online YouTube. Make sure to check that out. Last Friday, talked about the 10 most interesting questions on the Trinity from St. Thomas Aquinas, so make sure to check out last week's episode and stay tuned for this Friday. So that's the end of the first hour of our show.